Have you ever felt that something profound was happening in your life without being able to truly name it? As if heaven were acting in silence, without flashes, without visible miracles, but with constancy, with a depth that felt almost personal? Recently, an unexpected event captured the attention of believers across the world. The new Pope, Leo XIV, delivered an unexpected address, free from politics or power plays. It wasn't a traditional homily, but a direct spiritual warning, sharp, disarming, and deeply unsettling. He declared, "Many ask for blessings, but few recognize that they have already received them." These words, simple yet piercing, struck like a silent arrow into many hearts. Perhaps you are among those who have been touched, without even knowing it. Have you ever given thanks for blessings you failed to notice? Would you be able to recognize a miracle if it were wrapped in pain or confusion? Pope Leo XIV did not speak as a theorist, but as a prophet. He stated that there are three profound signs that indicate a soul has already been touched by God. Three marks of divine presence. And if you bear even one of them, it means heaven has already brushed against your life. But don't expect dramatic revelations. These signs do not shine. They come quietly, through discomfort, silence, and waiting. How many times have you thought you were abandoned, when in fact you were being shaped? How often have you believed God was silent when He was actually closer than ever? This message from the new Pope is an invitation to see our daily lives differently. Because in a world that demands visible proof, Leo XIV offers a very different path, to recognize the blessing where it seems absent. He described the three signs as footprints, discreet traces left by an invisible king who passed silently through the soul. He said, "If you bear even one of these three signs, then God has already visited you, even if you do not yet know it." And the first sign? It is surprising, because it wears the face of absence, yet it is in truth one of the most powerful testimonies of divine presence. That sign is the silence of God. You pray, but you feel nothing. You search, and you do not find. You enter a church, kneel, speak, but all you hear is the echo of your own voice. And yet, this might be the moment when you are most blessed. It seems strange, and yet, according to Leo XIV, it is in this silence that God teaches the soul to love without expecting anything in return, to trust, even without comfort, to persevere, even without understanding. He calls it spiritual silence, and it is the first sign. Even the saints walked through this inner desert. Saint Therese, Saint John of the Cross, Mother Teresa. All of them experienced long periods of spiritual dryness, not because they were far from God, but because they were called to come even closer, into a sacred darkness. It is there, in the silence, that faith sheds its superficial emotions, that love becomes fidelity, that prayer becomes a total offering. But our modern world rejects silence. It demands instant answers, intense experiences, spectacular miracles. And so many miss this sign. They believe God has withdrawn, when in truth He is shaping them. Leo XIV warns us, heaven often reveals itself through absence, to teach us faithfulness. If you are now living through a time of silence, if you walk by faith without understanding, if you wonder why God does not answer, perhaps you are experiencing what the Pope calls the blessing of mature faith, the kind that does not depend on signs, but on the heart. It is there, in the unseen, that light is forged. And if you recognize this silence within yourself, know this: you already carry the first sign. But that's not all. The second sign is even more unsettling. It is more painful, more immediate. It appears where suffering seems to dominate, and yet it is there that God acts with the greatest power, not to punish, but to transform. This second sign, according to Leo XIII, does not come through peace or clarity. It emerges through wounds. Yes, through those wounds that life inflicts without asking permission. We're not talking here about small setbacks or passing troubles, but about those deep pains that transform a person forever. Because sometimes God's blessing doesn't come as healing, but as a fracture, a break, something cracking deep within you. A loss, a separation, a betrayal, a failure so harsh it brought you to your knees. And yet, in that fall, something else opened. Something real. The Pope said, God doesn't always intervene to prevent the wound. He comes to enter it with you. And there lies the mystery. Many ask for peace, but God often sends truth first. And truth hurts. It disturbs. It shakes what you thought was certain. It strips you bare on the inside, until you're finally ready to be truly yourself. Have you ever gone through a moment when everything collapsed, and yet something within you refused to give in? A small flame? An inexplicable strength? A quiet resistance against despair? That wasn't instinct. That was grace. Raw, pure, unadorned. For Leo XIV, the wound is not a failure of God. It's often His signature. Because God doesn't always offer answers, but He transforms your pain into a path. He doesn't always calm the storm, but He gets in the boat with you. To suffer does not mean to be abandoned. On the contrary, the one who has been broken can become more real, more humble, more free than the one who never fell apart. There are wounds that save, collapses that become foundations. And if you carry within yourself an unhealed wound, a still tender scar, then maybe you already bear the second sign, the sign of a soul visited in the night. The Pope continued, sometimes God blesses through what He does not protect. These words deeply shook many believers. They challenged the idea of a God who would never allow His children to suffer. And yet, isn't it often in pain that we finally discover the truth about ourselves? That moment when you understand what truly matters, what was an illusion, what is worth keeping, and what you're finally ready to release. Suffering does not sanctify by itself, but what you do with it can become sacred. And sometimes it is the only way God can enter the parts of you where you never would have let Him otherwise. He enters through the crack. He walks through what has broken. So if you recognize yourself in this pain, in this season of struggle, loss, or confusion, know this: God is not far. He may be closer than ever. He doesn't always spare you the trial, but He makes it an altar. And from these ruins, He can bring forth a resurrection. You may not see it yet. You may not understand how, but your heart feels it. Something has shifted. And that strange sensation, that melancholy mixed with hope, that breath slowly returning despite the exhaustion, it may be the sign that God has passed through and stayed. Thus appears the second sign. Pain endured, not alone, but visited. But there is still a third sign, the most discreet, the most bewildering. It does not come through silence or suffering, but through another form of presence, almost imperceptible, that slowly transforms the way you love. This third sign doesn't speak, it acts. The third sign, the one Pope Leo XIV spoke of with a gravity that felt almost tender, is also the most subtle. It doesn't shout, doesn't shake your world, doesn't break the foundations of your life. No, it moves slowly, like a drop of water wearing down stone. And yet, it may be the most powerful of all. This third sign is the awakening of selfless love. Not passionate love, not reciprocal love, the kind that feeds on approval and returns, but this quiet love that begins to live inside you without you knowing exactly why. You start seeing others with more compassion. You react differently. You don't abandon your convictions, but your heart softens. You judge less. You listen more. It's that moment when you feel the need to help without being noticed, to extend a hand without expecting a thank you. The moment you choose to forgive, not because someone deserves it, but because you no longer want to carry the weight, because you feel that forgiveness frees first the one who gives it. The Pope said it this way: when love becomes stronger than ego, it means God has touched your heart. This third sign is like a gentle light. It shines without burning. It seeps into your gestures, your gaze, the way you speak to others. Sometimes you don't even recognize yourself. You wonder why you're acting this way, and yet you keep going. Maybe you've already experienced it. One day, for no apparent reason, you prayed for someone who had hurt you, or you defended someone who wasn't there to defend themselves. You stood up for a stranger. You comforted someone without expecting anything in return. And then you were surprised at yourself. That's the sign. Not a forced virtue, but a love that begins to arise outside of you and through you. You didn't decide to become a better person, but you are changing. You are being worked on. From within, you are being visited. Because this, according to Leo XIV, is the true mark of God in a soul. The growing ability to love as He loves, not out of duty, not for reward, but because you simply can't do otherwise. And yet, that doesn't mean you're perfect. You still struggle. You still doubt. You still fail sometimes. But there's a quiet constant, a hidden loyalty. You always return to love, even when you fall. Pope Leo XIV whispered a sentence that moved the hearts of those gathered. You know God is within you when you start loving those you don't understand. It's not an emotion. It's a slow decision, sometimes painful, but real. And it's there that true blessing is born, not in what you feel, but in who you choose to become. And if you recognize yourself in this third sign, then you no longer need proof, because you already carry the light. And even if it flickers, even if it's fragile, it is real. At the end of his message, Pope Leo XIV fell silent for a long moment. He let the quiet fill the room. He looked at the faces, one by one. And then he said, if you carry even one of these three signs, the silence, the wound, or the selfless love, then rejoice, because you have been touched. You may not know it, but God has already stepped through the door of your heart. This speech, though deeply moving, wasn't broadcast on major news outlets. Too spiritual, too inward, too far from the language of the world. But it continues to circulate quietly, shared, copied, whispered in churches, in prisons, in hospitals, where faith still has a place. It's not miracles that change the world. It's hearts that have been transformed. And if you've read this message this far, maybe something within you has already begun to move. No vision is needed, no apparition. Sometimes God passes by, in silence. Pope Leo XIV's message didn't end with formal blessings or liturgical chants. He stood slowly, looked out at the silent crowd, and added, with a gentleness that seemed to pass through the stone walls, "It is not I who bless you today. It is your own life that has already blessed you." Then he left, quietly, leaving behind a shaken crowd and hearts in disarray. That day, many walked out of that hall without saying a word. They didn't yet understand why they had cried, why those words had touched an old wound, a deep silence, a forgotten love. But all of them knew one thing: they had been seen. And you? Maybe you recognized one of those signs. Maybe even all three. Maybe, without fully realizing it, you've been carrying the mark of a calling, a quiet calling. Not the kind for grand missions, but for a transformation that is slow, internal, almost invisible, like sap rising inside a tree before any leaf appears. Because, according to Leo XIV, it's not about doing great things, it's about remaining faithful in the small ones, to pray without feeling, to love without expecting, to move forward without understanding. And in that quiet faithfulness, God acts. He digs, He shapes, He purifies. He doesn't always arrive with fire. Sometimes He is the drop of water on stone, the soft morning light, the silence that soothes rather than frightens. So if you've read this message to the end, take a moment. Breathe. Look at your life. Not the life you show others. Not the one you talk about. Look at the real one. The one where you struggle. The one where you doubt. The one where, despite everything, you continue. And ask yourself, honestly, have I been blessed without even knowing it? Because if you carry an inner silence, a wound that opened you, or a love that doesn't come from you, then it is not by chance. It is the quiet passing of a God who never forces the door, but who enters the moment it's cracked open, even without words. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to be real. And if you see yourself in this message, then know this: you are not alone. You are not lost. You are on the path, and this path has already been blessed. Maybe you haven't seen the fruit yet, but the seed is there, and it will not die.